taking us on a lovely, lovely outside talk. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer. And you're up, darling.
All right, thank you, Kathleen. So, hello, everyone. And it seems to me that this time of year, there is like this undeniable force between my car and garden centers. And
know the feeling.
yes, those beautiful flowers and marvelous variegated leaves and all the lovely shades of green. They just call out, buy me, buy me. But then I get home and I think, where am I going to put these? And are these colors going to work together? Well, I am so super excited to introduce our guest speaker this morning. His topic is designing with intention, color in the landscape. That's right, color in the landscape for all of those who can't resist those beautiful plants. And my, oh my, does he know what he is talking about? He has over 20 years experience in the landscape industry with a keen focus on design and creating sustainable landscapes. He is an artist and he takes a creative approach to projects using the elements and principles of design to develop absolutely stunning landscapes. And his designs gracefully blend structure and nature with the goal of bringing unity and order to the landscape. Does that sound good? He has worked on projects featured in Atlanta Homes and Lifestyle, Atlanta Botanical Garden, as well as high-end residential, commercial office, and retail landscape design. He has also helped develop and spent 5 years teaching the landscape design program at Emory Continuing Education. He is an accomplished artist who specializes in architectural renderings, which he sells internationally. And his work has been featured on TLC's While You Were Out, as well as multiple publications. He lives in North Georgia with his wife and 2 children, where he enjoys a passion for writing poetry. You know that's right up my alley, drawing portraits and working in the garden. So please join me in welcoming acclaimed artist and landscape designer, Jonathan Williams.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to virtually meet you. And Jennifer, thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm going to have to hire you for all of my introductions going forward. That was fantastic. I am very excited to be here with you guys today and excited to talk about designing with intention. Before we get started, I do want to jump right in with a couple disclaimers and comments. First off, we will pause for questions at the end of today's presentation. I will ask some participation questions throughout the presentation, but if you could hold any questions that you have for me till the end of today's presentation, that would be fantastic. We've got a lot to get through. That being said, there's a lot of information that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So if you do not have a pen and paper with you, I suggest that you quickly grab one so you can take some notes today. I think there'll be some information that you want to jot down that will help you with planning your landscape. And while you're grabbing your notepad and your pen and paper, I'm going to do a screen share. I will have chat open during this presentation. I'm going to do a screen share of my slide deck here. You should all see my screen now. Bear with me while I get everything opened on my end. And I will do an introduction, kind of show you guys some examples of my work, and then we will get started. We're going to have a lot of fun today. So designing with intention. Today we're going to be focusing on color in the landscape, but we are going to do a quick overview of design principles and elements. There'll be some really awesome information for you guys in that. And I see a comment already coming in about speaker view. That will be the best way to watch this presentation. So if you go to view in the top right-hand corner of your screen on Zoom, you can hit speaker view, and that'll be the best way to watch the presentation today. All right, I think I've got everything open now, and we are good to go. So again, as Jennifer mentioned, I've been in the landscape industry for over 20 years. I've worked in high-end residential, commercial. I do a lot of seasonal color design. So I know a lot of you are planning your seasonal color, your flowers, your begonias, your petunias, your angelonia. So we'll be talking a lot about color theory today, which will really help you when you're designing your flower beds. This is the 2014 designer show house for Atlanta Homes and Lifestyle. This was in Serenbe. Anybody ever been to Serenbe? Show of hands. It's a really awesome community. It's built around a farm. It has an equestrian center, a playhouse. It's a really cool community in South Georgia. So I collaborated with Bellwether Landscape Architects on this project, but this is a beautiful terrace garden, and this is a monochromatic green color scheme that you're seeing on your screen now. We're going to talk about that in more detail later on, but a monochromatic green color scheme. Again, this is a terrace garden. Really, really fun project. I'm in collaboration with Atlanta Homes and Lifestyle on this. An example of a fireplace, an outdoor fireplace that I designed and built. We're going to touch on dominant features in the landscape today, and this will be a dominant feature in someone's backyard. For those of you that went to Alice's Wonderland display at Atlanta Botanical Garden, I did not design the topiaries, but I did design the chessboard. So we went back and forth with Atlanta Botanical Garden. At one point, they had considered using 2 different types of turf to create the chessboard. And I made a recommendation that we alternate concrete and artificial turf. How many of you visited Alice's Alice in Wonderland display? Alice's Wonderland, as they called it. Really, really amazing exhibit that they had. And so I designed the chessboard. We actually, as you can see, had to install this around the existing topiaries. So we had to pour concrete and install artificial turf around these structures. And we literally finished 2 hours before the opening, the member opening, but a really, really cool project. We had a ton of fun with that. Got some really great photos as well. Hardly looks real, does it? Quite incredible. This is my backyard. So I live in Sterling on the lake here in North Georgia. And so we moved into a smaller home. And this was our backyard, as you can see, quite lovely. And this is what we were able to transform it in. So we did this I did all the work myself. We implemented this during the beginning of the pandemic. Had a lot of time on our hands. So you can see the transformation from this small patio space to what I have now. This is another angle. So again, a very small backyard that I have here. But even in tight spaces, applying the design principles and elements of design, you can really create some stunning landscapes. Again, I'll go back and forth here so you can kind of see the before and afters. A lot of fun. This is an example of a landscape conceptual plan. I know I have a student in today's presentation or in today's group. So this is a landscape conceptual plan. This is an aerial view of a landscape. This is a backyard. This is actually that fireplace that I shared a few slides earlier that I designed for a client. Another example of one of my plans. And I am an artist as well, so I'm monitoring chat. So if you hear me pause, I'm just glancing over. Yeah, Kathleen is the student, so I'm glancing over at chat as I'm presenting today. So I'm also an artist. I produce architectural renderings. So I sell these to real estate agents, and they use them as closing gifts. And that's this example. I say I sell them to real estate agents. I sell them to anyone, but mostly real estate agents that use these for marketing images and for closing gifts to clients. So the same principles and elements that you would use in art, you also use in design. So we'll be going over, color today, but again, it's those same principles that can be applied to both design, landscape design, or in your artwork. And I do pencil portraits for fun. So this is Reese Witherspoon, and then we have Chevy Chase. So we're going to dive right in. Again, if you have your, make sure you have that notepad and pencil handy to take some notes. But we'll kick off today with a question. What are the characteristics of a great landscape to you? Let me know in chat. We're going to keep everything in chat. So just let me know in chat. When you see an amazing, beautiful landscape, what stands out to you? What do you consider a great characteristic of a landscape? What really stands out to you most is what I'm looking for. Symmetry. That's great. Thank you, Rebecca. Symmetry of plants. So symmetrical balance, definitely something that stands out. What else jumps out at you when you're looking at a landscape and you say, wow, that's absolutely beautiful. Scale, that's awesome. Definitely, we always need to be considering scale, the feeling of awe. I like that. That's really great. So relaxation, maybe. If we see a landscape that appears to be soothing and calming, that's something that attracts us. Many of us, look at landscaping as a way to decompress and to relax. Modesty. Simple would be another way to say that. Simple, not overcomplicated. Something always in bloom. That's a great comment. For those of you that are taking notes, I call that dynamic interest. Dynamic interest, always maintaining interest throughout the year. So a lot of novice designers will design landscapes that are very spring heavy or very summer heavy. We want to make sure that we're maintaining interest throughout the year. So we're thinking about the landscape in fall. We're thinking about the landscape in winter, spring, and summer. Texture contrast. Absolutely. Using texture appropriately, understanding texture. We won't go over texture too much today, but we'll definitely touch on color. But texture is very, very important. A lot of people say that texture is longer lasting than color. So texture is really important. If you have a plant or a perennial that blooms for a short window, you may appreciate that color for 4 to 6 weeks, but that texture may persist for the entire growing season or maybe even the entire year. So a lot of times texture is more, has more longevity than color even does. A focal point. Color principles. I love it. With color principles, we'll move on to the next group of slides. But this is great, guys. These are really great answers. So thank you. So I've broken down the characteristics of a great landscape into 4 simple characteristics, or 4 basic characteristics. The first one being simple. This is a noteworthy comment. So I highly encourage those of you that are taking notes to write this down. What are you trying to hide and what are you trying to accent? This is a very fundamental building block to creating a great landscape. Another way to word this is reveal and conceal. Reveal and conceal. Anytime I approach a landscape, the first thing that I do is I take a picture. So take a picture of the front yard, take a picture of the backyard, and write down your initial thoughts. Write down what you need to reveal, what you want to see, what you want to attract attention to. Don't miss this. What you want to attract attention to and what you want to hide. I went out to lunch this past Sunday with my mom, my dad, and my sister. And my sister shared with me that she had built a structure to conceal her garbage cans on the side of her house. She put up this beautiful trellis to screen her garbage can and then planted a climbing rose on that trellis. Now pause for a moment and think about that. If we're trying to conceal something, is a climbing rose necessarily the best thing on that trellis? If we're trying to hide something, would a climbing rose not draw our eye and attract attention to that garbage can? Did I share that with my sister? No. I'll share it with you. So if you're trying to conceal something, we really need to think about how we're using color, how we're using texture. A garbage can, a utility box. How many of you have a utility box adjacent to your lot or maybe even in your front yard? Show of hands. Anyone have a utility box? What color? You can let me know in chat. What color are those utility boxes typically painted? Like an olive green, a dark green. I see some nodding, right? Have you seen this? So that dark green. So that color, Disney has actually coined that phrase. It's called "go away green" is what they use because it recedes into the background. It's not something that's too advancing and it doesn't stand out. So it's really important when you're approaching a landscape that you identify if we're trying to hide something or we're trying to accent something. So many homeowners, so many novice designers really miss this. Again, using the example with my sister who has this trellis now with a rose on it trying to conceal her garbage can. So don't miss this. What is the star of the front of the home? Let me know in chat. What do you think the star, the front of the home? It's kind of obvious. What's the star of the front of the home? So if you're looking at standing in your front door, thank you. That's great. So the front door is the star of the front of the home. If you have a utility box, garbage cans, a garage door, those garage doors, those garbage cans, that utility box, those are not the star. Those we want to go away. We want those to recede into the background. We want to draw attention to that front door. Reveal and conceal. What are you trying to hide and what are you trying to accent? Sustainable. What has been done to return the landscape to its natural form? That's a simple way to look at sustainability. treating water as a resource. And we could spend a week on this subject. So we're just hitting the high notes here, but making sure that we are designing a landscape as it relates to design that is sustainable. That starts with right plant, right place. Knowing what size the plants that you are using are going to grow to. How many of you measure your windowsills before you plant against the front of the house or the back of the house? How many of you have done that to determine what height the plants need to be? A lot of homeowners miss that. So they'll go and they'll purchase a plant that'll grow to be 6 foot tall when they really need it to stay at 3 foot tall. So now we're having to constantly prune it. And that's how we get those meatball shapes, those softballs that we see in the landscape that are unattractive. We want to be planning for lower maintenance landscapes. How often are we having to replenish the mulch? Layering in plant material so that we're not constantly having to install pine straw and mulch. Returning the landscape to its natural form. And again, we could spend a week or longer on this subject, but sustainability is a characteristic of a great landscape. Right plant, right place, treating water as a resource, making sure that you are planning for the right plant by measuring window sills, determining sunlight conditions, etc. Creating sustainable landscapes. Purposeful. What is the goal and the purpose of the landscape? And you may have different goals for the front and backyard. Often you do. The backyard, for those of you that are taking notes, is about outdoor living spaces. The backyard is about outdoor living spaces. The front yard, that's all about curb appeal. So in the backyard, we're thinking about our outdoor dining room, our outdoor living room, maybe a play area. That could be our lawn. Maybe we have pets. How is the landscape going to be used? What are our goals? If you are designing, for example, an outdoor living room space, should you give some consideration to how many people you will be entertaining in that space? Definitely. You should definitely consider that. You should be considering how you're going to move throughout the landscape. If you're designing outdoor living spaces, how am I going to get from point A to point B? Think about your interior living room. When you're walking through, for example, your interior living room to your dining room, there's a path. We don't want furniture in that path. The same is true of our outdoor living spaces. We want to think about how we're moving through those spaces, the appropriate size of those spaces, and the relationship to those spaces to one another. How is the landscape going to be used? What is the goal of the landscape? For the front yard, it may be all about curb appeal. But even with curb appeal, there's some questions that we need to ask ourselves. If the goal for the front landscape is curb appeal, well, how is it going to be viewed? Do I live on a main road where passerbyers are driving by at 45 miles an hour and that's how my landscape's going to be viewed? That's definitely a consideration. When we get into color theory, I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. But if that's how your landscape's going to be viewed, we need to know that, because that's going to help us when we start making decisions about the types of colors that we want to use for curb appeal. Some colors can be appreciated at 45 miles an hour. Others, not so much. That's an important consideration. What is the goal of the landscape? Take the time to discover this. Have a conversation with your spouse, with your partner, with your friends. Talk about how you're going to use the landscape. Are you trying to create an outdoor living space where you can relax and be calm? That's important to know. Are you wanting some, really, great curb appeal? You want to attract a lot of attention to the front yard? That's also good to know. That'll help us. Those are the building blocks. These are the questions that you need to be asking to create a great landscape. What's the purpose? Beautiful. Have you used the design principles and elements well? And the first step to that is understanding what those principles and elements are. And I'm going to do a quick overview. This is a lot of information that's going to come pretty quickly. Feel free to take some notes. Again, if you have any questions, jot them down. I will pause for questions at the end of the presentation today. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on each one of these principles and elements because we are going to be focusing on color today. But beautiful. How have we used the design principles and elements in the landscape? So what are the design principles? So order. That is the base framework. That's the structure of your design. One of you mentioned symmetry as part of a great landscape, or that's a characteristic that you would describe as a characteristic of a great landscape. So there's two different types of symmetry: symmetrical and asymmetrical. Both of these would fall into order under the term balance. So you can write that down. Order is all about balance and mass planting. I'm going to repeat that. Order in landscape design is about balance, asymmetrical or symmetrical, and mass plantings. Symmetry, symmetrical balance, is a mirror image. So it's the same on the left as it is on the right. And that is a great characteristic. It attracts attention. The problem with symmetry in the landscape is it's against nature. So as it relates to, and this is a noteworthy comment, as it relates to symmetrical balance. So I want you to picture in your head symmetrical balance. That is a mirror image. It's the same on the left as it is on the right. As far as symmetrical balance is concerned, closer to the structure, green light, you are good to go. So closer to the foundation of a home, symmetrical balance is fantastic. The further away that you get into the landscape, asymmetrical. Asymmetrical is natural. It's less maintenance. Picture a formal landscape where you've got boxwood hedges on both sides of the home. If one of those boxwoods dies on the right-hand side of the home, what do you have to do to the one on the left? Would you have to replace them both? Quite possibly. Are you having to maintain them at the same size? Yes. Symmetrical balanced landscapes are not sustainable, they're high maintenance, and they're costly. That being said, closer to the foundation of the home, symmetrical balance works, and it works well. It can create a grand sense of entry. You can write that down. A grand sense of entry can be created with symmetrical balance. Picture two topiaries on either side of a front door. So two topiaries on either side of a front door can create that grand sense of entry, and that's symmetrical balance. But a great landscape, the further away that you get, is going to be asymmetrical. An important disclaimer as I'm going through this information today. These are guidelines. These are not rules. If you drive through Capital City after today's presentation, you're going to see these immaculate landscapes that are completely symmetrical balanced. Those homeowners are spending thousands and thousands of dollars maintaining those landscapes, those boxwood hedges, and it is lovely, it is beautiful, it is wonderful. These are guidelines. What you need to know when designing your landscape is that there's more effort and energy and work and money that goes into maintaining landscapes that are all completely symmetrically balanced. Symmetrical balanced landscapes are typically very formal, but you can use symmetrical balance closer to a structure to create that grand sense of entry. Order, mass plantings. This is a master gardener's class. So I know all of you love plants, and that is fantastic. But as opposed to a consideration, and I'm going to the next topic, unity, we're going to get into this a little bit more. Grouping plant material together in masses. Again, another noteworthy comment. Grouping plant material together in masses allows you to appreciate the unique qualities of that plant. If you have 20 hydrangeas grouped together, the blooms of that hydrangea are going to be better appreciated than just having one hydrangea. If one hydrangea chooses not to bloom as profusely this year, that won't matter if it's grouped with 20. The unique characteristics of a plant can be appreciated when those plants are grouped together in masses. So mass planting and balance. Unity. Unity, so that is the relationship of all the elements in a design. Cohesion is another way to think about unity. Unity is very simple. Unity is where we repeat plants or similar plants. So a simple way to create unity in the landscape is if you have azaleas on one side of the landscape, repeat those azaleas on another side of the landscape. And by doing so, that repetition, that's the key word, that repetition of plants is going to create unity. So the composition, your landscape is going to be seen as a unified whole if you repeat plant material. You don't have to repeat plant material. You can repeat similar colors. You can repeat, for example, you could have, we'll go back to hydrangeas. You could have hydrangeas blooming in one area, and you could have white, let's say you have white hydrangeas in one area, you could have white crepe myrtles in another area. And as long as those two plants are blooming at the same time, you're going to have some unity because you're repeating white. Thumbs up if we're following along with unity. Unity is pretty simple. Now here is the best part, or the best piece of information that I can give a master gardener's class. What do you do when you have 125 different perennials in your yard? Because you love plants, and every time you go to the nursery, you're picking up a plant and you're planting it in your yard. And it feels chaotic, it feels overwhelming, maybe it feels a little bit messy to you. How can you unify a landscape where you have all these plants that you love, but there's just something missing? A dominant feature. A dominant feature. That could be anything from a bird bath to a teak bench. It could be an arbor. It could be a swing. It could be a fireplace, like in my backyard. It could be a Japanese maple. Anything or any element where the eye can rest. Somewhere where the eye can rest. It'll make everything else secondary or subordinate, is another way to word that. So if you have a dominant feature in your landscape, and the key with dominant features is a guideline, 1 to 3 dominant features. When you go over 3 for the average landscape, then you're going to have the adverse effect. 1 to 3 dominant features. And it really just depends on your unique situation, the size of your yard. But a dominant feature gives the eye somewhere to rest and will immediately make the landscape less visually chaotic. So a dominant feature can create unity. A lot of times when I work with, master gardeners, there's a lot of plants in the landscape because we're plant lovers and we love plants, and there's nothing wrong with that. What's often missing is a dominant feature, somewhere for the eye to rest. So if that's you, that may be all that you're missing. Rhythm, I'm going to touch on briefly. It's the visual harmony in design. I don't want to overcomplicate it. Rhythm is something we spend a lot of time on. There's two characteristics of rhythm. One is repetition, and it's different than repetition and unity. Repetition is a sequence. So the easiest way to explain that is, how many of you have seen these long driveways with like an alley of trees that line the driveway? That's rhythm repetition. So that creates movement in the landscape. It encourages you or your eye to move through the landscape. It's repetition at a given sequence. So think about those trees when you're driving down that driveway. It's a given sequence, just like in music. So that's repetition and rhythm, and we won't spend too much time on that. Where repetition or where rhythm is more commonly used in landscape is gradation. Gradation, this is a noteworthy comment, is the smooth transition from one element to another. The smooth transition from one element to another. So if you have a wooded area in your backyard and you have a lawn, if you immediately go from a natural space to a lawn, there's no gradation. There's no soft transition from this natural area to this manicured lawn. So layering in plant material, stepping down from that wooded area where you may have these tall trees to a more manicured lawn, that would be adding in gradation. And that is a element of rhythm. So gradation, think about it in plant layers, the background layer, the middle ground, the foreground. Layers of plant material is the best way to describe gradation, but there can be gradation of other elements like color, which we'll get into as well. But again, with that natural wooded area, if you have that harsh contrast, okay, this is natural, this is manicured. An easy way to resolve that is layering in some plant material to create that gradation. And then variety. This was something that we touched on when I asked the question of what are the characteristics of a great landscape to you. Someone made a comment of, seasonal interest, maintaining interest throughout the year, variety. So having a variety throughout the year of plant material, having depth and interest at any given season, having a variety of colors, having interest. It would be really easy to have all the same plant in a landscape and say, well, it's completely unified. Well, it would lack visual interest. We need to make sure that we have a good balance of unity and variety in the landscape. Thumbs up. So that was a very quick lesson on, that makes sense? You get some good notes from that. That was a very quick lesson on design principles. Design elements. Okay, so today we're going to be going over color. Other considerations are texture, form, line, and scale. We don't have time to go over texture, form, line, and scale today, so we're going to be focusing on color. Hue, tints, and shades. Color is to the eye what music is to the ear. We're going to jump right into color now. So right into color. This is going to be a lot of fun, guys. Color is to the eye what music is to the ear. Digest that for a moment. Think about that. Color is to the eye what music is to the ear. Louis Comfort Tiffany. Let me know in chat if you know who Louis Comfort Tiffany is. And it is Louis. A lot of people say Louis. It's Louis Comfort Tiffany. Does anyone know who that is? Let me know in chat if you know who Louis Comfort Tiffany is. I'm sure many of you do. What is he known for? I'm going to take a sip of coffee while you guys let me know in chat. Tiffany glass. Thank you. Tiffany glass. So his dad was Charles Louis Tiffany, the founder of Tiffany and Company. And Louis Comfort Tiffany did work as a designer for Tiffany and Company. I am an avid Tiffany and Company and Tiffany Studios collector. Louis Comfort Tiffany founded Tiffany Studios, and he is known for his stained glass. He was a master of color. He was a painter by trade and later got into stained glass, and he was absolutely a master of color. Color is to the eye what music is to the ear. If you recall, when we were going over the characteristics of a great landscape, we touched on purposeful. How is the landscape going to be used? This is a question that I always ask my clients. What type of lifestyle do you have, and how do you see yourself using the landscape? If my client says, I have a very demanding lifestyle, I am constantly working in the city, I have the joy of sitting in Atlanta traffic for 3 hours every day, and I really want to decompress in my landscape, that's really important information to me. I need to know that because I can create that type of mood or setting using color theory. I want to know this is an area that my client wants to feel calm. They want to feel at peace, and they want to relax, decompress. If I have a client that is retired and spends a lot of time at home, they may want the landscape to be more exciting and more vibrant, more tropical, like a resort, like a vacation. That is something that I need to know as well, because I can also create that type of impression or mood using color theory. So think about, Kenny G, right? Kenny G music, calm, cool, and collected. I'm a 90s music guy. So Kenny G, right? Very calm, soothing, relaxing. Or Whitney Houston, I want to dance with somebody. Very energetic music. Same is true of color. I'll show you some examples of Louis Comfort Tiffany's work. This is the wisteria lamp. How many of you have seen this before? Show of hands. Wisteria lamp, maybe familiar with this? In 1906, this lamp sold for $400. Anyone want to guess what it recently sold for? Let me know in chat. How much do you think this recently sold for? 1906, $400. What do you think it recently sold for? This particular lamp. 10 times that. So this sold for $1.5 million, this particular example. They tend to sell anywhere from 600 up to $1 million. This one actually sold for $1.5 million, this lamp. I want you to take a visual screenshot or a mental screenshot, a snapshot of this image in your mind. We are going to come back to this, and I am going to ask you what color scheme was used for this lamp. What color scheme was used? And Kathleen is the only one that I will not accept an answer from, because she probably remembers this question from class. So what color scheme was used? We'll come back to that at the end of the presentation today. This is the wisteria lamp. So this is Madonna and Child. This is Mother Mary. This is baby Jesus. There are 7 angels surrounding them. Thank you, Kathleen. This is a beautiful stained glass window. So Louis Comfort Tiffany was a master of color. And in his studio, he would have multiple artists that would work on these stained glass windows. And before these windows were shipped out, he would walk and do an inspection of them. So he would walk around the stained glass window, and he had with him a little wooden punch and a little hammer. And he would walk up to this glass window, and he would find a piece of it that wasn't the right color, and he would punch it out. And then he would call out a number, what's G26. And what that meant was green 26. He had thousands upon thousands, upward of 5,000 different sheets of glass that he would call numbers out for. And he would say green 30, green 26 or green 50 or yellow 10. He would call these numbers out, and he would have his artisans replace that piece of glass with whatever color he would call out. And that was just because he was a master of color. He was a painter by trade. So he was used to different tints and shades of color. A masterful artist, just beautiful work here, Madonna and Child. All right, so this is a color wheel. Many of you have seen this before. We're going to go through this particular slide pretty quickly. Hue, that is pure color. Hue, pure color. Tint is hue plus white. Tone is hue plus gray. And shade is hue and black. So hue, pure, rich color, vibrant color. Tint is mixing that hue with white. Tone, mixing it with gray. Shade, mixing it with black. This is a color wheel. So hue, tint, tone, and shade. The color wheel can be divided into two halves, warm and cool colors. I know it's early and some of you maybe have not had enough coffee yet, so really pay attention, lean in. This is really important information. All right, warm colors advance. Warm colors advance. That means that they appear closer to you. Warm colors attract attention. They draw your eye in. There's a debate that goes on with warm colors. Is yellow the first color your eye sees, or is red the first color your eye sees? The answer to that question is yellow. Many fire departments are repainting their fire trucks yellow because yellow is it's the first color that your eye sees. For people that are colorblind, they can't see red, so they can see yellow, and yellow in shade environments stands out more. So you'll notice this with signs, road signs. You'll see a yellow sign that says, hey, a stop sign's coming up. How many of you have seen those type of road signs before? Yellow. It draws attention. So yellow is the first color that your eye sees. This is really, really important because you're screening your AC units this weekend. You know, I've been wanting to screen my AC units. So I've decided that I'm going to use Gold Dust Acuba. I have a lot of clients that use Gold Dust Acuba to screen their AC units. What are some things that we know about Gold Dust Acuba? Well, it has very large leaves. Correct? Thumbs up. My master gardeners, we know what this is, right? Very large leaves. So it's coarse textured. So that alone attracts a lot of attention. We're not going to get too much into texture, but coarse texture attracts attention. Large leaves attract attention. And it's also, it's variegated foliage. So it's yellow. Yellow is the first color that your eye sees. So when you start getting into chartreuses and yellows, you're attracting attention. So warm colors attract attention. Warm colors are also very exciting. Fast food chains use warm colors. Think about McDonald's with that red and yellow, those golden arches, right? Next time you're scarfing down, you know, a Big Mac, it's not your fault. You were tricked into it through the use of color. You didn't know that color, also yellow, can make you hungry. Fast food chains want to get you in the door and out the door. So they use warm colors, exciting colors. Hey, we're here. Come in and get out. Warm colors are exciting. They strike a motion of excitement. They attract attention. They advance. They appear closer to you. Cool colors are relaxing. They're calming. When you go to the dentist's office, when you go to the doctor's office, you will notice that all the wallpaper, they're cool colors. Cool colors recede into the background. They appear further away from you. They calm you. They relax you. Warm colors excite. Cool colors relax. Warm colors advance. Cool colors recede. If we're trying to conceal something, cooler colors would be a better choice for concealing something. Thumbs up. Is everyone following along? This is some basic information about color. Okay. Let's get into some color schemes. Monochromatic color schemes. The example that you see on your screen now is green, transitioning through all of its shades, tones, tints, through hue, right? So it's going from shades through tones, through its hue, all the way up to its tint. So look here on the right-hand side of your screen. We got shades going in to tones. Then we're hitting our pure hue, going all the way up to tints, up until white. This would be considered a monochromatic green color scheme. Monochromatic green color scheme. Now, what I want you to know about a monochromatic color scheme is there's not a lot of variety of color. If you remember, one of the design principles was variety. Everyone recall mentioning variety? So if we have the absence of variety of color, we need to make sure that we have some texture contrast. Write that down. If you are creating a monochromatic green color scheme where there's not a lot of variety in color, your variety can be something like form or texture contrast. Texture contrast is an easy go-to in a monochromatic color scheme. So having different types of textures, fine textures like grasses and coarse textures like hostas. When we say coarse texture in landscape design, it's the size, it's visual texture, it's the size of a leaf. Hydrangeas, magnolias, hostas, that would be coarse textured. Fine texture would be things like ferns and grasses. Does that make sense? Thumbs up if you understood that. So that's just a brief overview of texture. But texture contrast is really important if you're using a monochromatic color scheme, because you don't have a lot of variety of color. So have a variety of something, and texture is an easy go-to. So monochromatic color schemes, specifically this monochromatic color scheme, white that you're seeing here, are green going all the way up to white. Just be a green monochromatic color scheme. These can be very formal, and you see these a lot in moon gardens. Now I want to pause for just a moment while we're talking about color schemes. I had a student break down in tears after this class once. So it was about 3 days after this class. She was in tears and she sent me an email and she goes, I cannot understand how to use green in my color scheme. And as we go through this, you're going to understand why she was flustered. These are guidelines. These are not hard rules. So please know that. The second thing is green can be part of your color scheme. Write this down. It can be part of your color scheme, or it can be a neutral. Let's face it. Green, if you're doing landscape design, is going to be part of your color scheme one way or another. And she could not get past that. She couldn't understand how green worked into all these color schemes. It can either be a neutral or it can be part of your color scheme. And that choice is up to you. What are you doing? You're designing with intention. Great landscapes don't happen by accident. Planning goes into them. And as you're planning, you as the designer, you as the artist get to make that decision. Is it a neutral? Is it part of my color scheme? There's a reason behind what I'm doing. And in this example, green would be a huge part. It is the color scheme. In other examples, it will be a neutral. And some examples, it will be part of the color scheme. So monochromatic color schemes, it's a color going through its different shades, its different tones, pure hue through tints, monochromatic. Analogous. Out of all of the color schemes that we are going to review today, this is the one that I use most often. How many of you have heard the term analogous colors before? Okay, awesome. Analogous colors are colors that are adjacent to each other on the color wheel. These are colors that are most often found together in nature. That is why they are so commonly used in landscape design. These are colors that you see in the sunset when you're looking at a forest. The image that you see on your left is a Japanese garden. I'm sure many of you may have Japanese gardens or at least appreciate Japanese gardens. Japanese gardens are meant to what? Emulate nature. That's the underlying principle of a Japanese garden. They emulate nature. That's one of the basic building blocks to a Japanese garden is they emulate nature. So most Japanese gardens use analogous color schemes, colors that are adjacent to each other. Look at the color wheel on your screen. So you've got chartreuse, you've got green, and you've got blue. And if we look at the image, we have yellow. So look, we can have what's called a complex. You can write this down, a complex analogous color scheme. This is where you really can go from one color all the way over to its complement. So you could go from yellow through chartreuse to green to blues, all the way up to purple. And that would be called a complex analogous color scheme. Maybe you just have yellow. Look at it. Can everyone see my cursor? Thumbs up. Good. So we could go from yellow to chartreuse to green to blue, even into dark blue. So from yellow to blue, and that's still a complex analogous color scheme. If we go all the way around the color wheel, we're at a different color scheme, which we'll go over later. But colors that are adjacent to each other. Remember that term with rhythm gradation, the smooth transition from one element to another? This is gradation used with color theory. Analogous. It is the most common color scheme found in nature. And therefore, for me as a designer, it's the most common color scheme that I use. Now, I know you're looking at your screen, you're like, yeah, but I want some color. Okay, so let's talk about that. Can we add in color with an analogous color scheme, like another color besides this smooth transition? We can. So let's go back to Japanese gardens. And in chat, think about this for just a second. Picture a Japanese garden in your mind. What is a bold color that you see in a lot of Japanese gardens? Don't overthink it. What is a bold color that you see in a lot of Japanese gardens? Think about structures that you see in Japanese gardens. Buildings. What is the color? I'm waiting for somebody to get red. Thank you. We got a couple reds coming in. Great. Reds. Lots of reds. That is correct. Reds. So red, you'll see a red pagoda. You'll see a red building. Sometimes it'll be a red structure. That is called an accented analogous color scheme. Accented analogous color scheme. Look at your color wheel here. Do you see these three colors that we're calling analogous? What is the center color? Green. See green here? If we jump across the color wheel to the complementary color of green, we get red. So if you have an analogous color scheme, you find the center color in that color scheme and you use its complement. I'm gonna let everyone digest that for a minute. So you see the three colors adjacent to each other. The center color is this green. The complement of that green is red. And that's why Japanese gardens use red, because it is the complementary color to the center color in their analogous color scheme. And that will work. And it works well. So accented analogous. Now, if we look here, if we went from yellow all the way through blue, and I use this color scheme a lot, so yellow, then we could really pick between red and kind of this fuchsia color as well. So a lot of times what I do in analogous color schemes, I use a lot of chartreuse, I use a lot of green and a lot of blue and yellow. I will use a tint of red. A tint of red could be pink, or I'll use a fuchsia color. Thumbs up if that's making sense. Following along? Great. And again, write down your questions and we'll review those at the end. I'm monitoring time. We've just got a few more that we want to go through. Analogous colors from a distance may appear to be one color. So if you're looking at this image on the left from 50 yards, it's going to blend together. You may only see yellow. So from a distance, you may not appreciate all the individual colors, but close up you would. What is important to know with any of these color schemes, and this is a noteworthy comment, it's always a good idea to pick a dominant color for most color schemes. Yellow loves to be dominant. It's the first color that your eye sees. So from my perspective, if it likes to be dominant, let it. So yellow is a good color to pick as your dominant. Does that mean that out of all my color schemes, yellow is always the dominant color? Absolutely not. I'm just pointing out that it likes to be dominant. So instead of fighting it, sometimes embrace it if you're using yellow in your color scheme, and let it be dominant because it wants to be anyways. Moving on from analogous. Pastel colors. These are very, very, very popular. And this graphic is not the best representation of what I'm going to be teaching you about pastel colors. So I'll explain that, particularly this tone image here, but I'll explain that in a moment. Tints and tones. There are two different types of pastels, and most of you are very, very familiar with tints. So tints are your traditional pastel color schemes. Think Easter. So you've got whites, you've got pinks, you've got yellows, you've got very bright, what I call cheery, happy pastels. Cheery, happy pastels. Traditional pastels. And again, many of you are very familiar with this. You've seen this. You're already using this in your landscape design. So it's light lavenders, it's pops of yellow, it's pops of whites. What is important to know is structures like this fence, like an arbor, can be part of your color scheme. This doesn't have to just be plants, doesn't have to be plant foliage or flowers. structures can also be part of your color scheme, like with this white fence. Cheery, happy, pastel color schemes. Those are very common and very, very popular. What is becoming more popular, or has been more popular lately, are toned pastels. Now, you're not going to find a lot of literature about this, so take notes, because I have done a lot of research and use this color scheme a lot. So toned pastels are very popular. You see this. This is the mauves that you see. You see women dyeing their hair this color, these light purples, this gray. It's very popular. Gray adult pastels, sophisticated pastels is very popular with interior design right now. Grays and mauves, dark pinks, dark purples. The key to this is, if you want to create a aesthetic like this type of pastel color scheme, if you want to use this, write this down. No whites, no yellows. No whites, no yellows, blues and grays. Lamb's ear. Add lamb's ear. That's a great one. Lavenders. Add in some plants that have Dusty Miller. Add in some plants that have gray and blue foliage, and try not to use any yellows or whites, or at a minimum, limit the amount of yellows and whites that you're using. The absence of yellow and white and using toned colors like, darker purples, blues, soft pinks, and grays, you can create this sophisticated adult pastel color scheme. Gray stone, for those of you that have boulders in your landscape, those are a great way to add in that gray color. I'll give you an example. Lamb's ear, sweet pink drift rose, lavender, and a gray boulder together, and you immediately have this color scheme. I'll repeat that. Gray boulder, lamb's ear, sweet pink drift rose, and phenomenal lavender, and voila, you have a sophisticated pastel grouping. These are very, very popular right now. So you see a lot of this on Pinterest. You'll see it in magazines. Again, clothing, interior design, hair. I've seen hair colors that are this grayish purple. So sophisticated pastels. Complementary colors. We're moving quickly. We're going to pause for questions. Complementary colors at the end. We'll take some questions. Complementary colors are colors that are adjacent to each other on the color wheel. And you're all familiar, you've heard complementary colors before. What you need to know about complementary colors is they intensify each other. Complementary colors intensify one another. They consist of one warm color and one cool color. Now, how does that relate to landscape design? So, how many of you plant violas or pansies in the winter? Right? How many of you have used yellow and purple violas and pansies as a color scheme before? Probably many of you. I'm sure at some point maybe have used that or seen it at least. Well, what do we know about warm and cool colors? Well, we know that warm colors advance. We know that cool colors recede. So let's think about that pansy flower bed that we're going to design. We want to use complementary colors, and we have decided that we're going to use yellow and purple. We remember that our instructor, our speaker today, said that we should pick a dominant color. So we are going to pick yellow. Yellow wants to be dominant. So we're going to have mostly yellow, but we're going to pop in some purple pansies. So now we know complementary color scheme. It's yellow, it's purple, mostly yellow. Well, there's still a mistake that we could make. What if we planted the yellow pansies in the back of the flower bed and let me rephrase that. What if we planted the purple pansies in the back of the bed and the yellow in the front of the bed? So now we have yellow in front of purple. If you are driving by or walking by and you look at that flower bed, those purple flowers in the back of that bed are going to recede into the background and disappear because that yellow is so advancing, it's in the front. You're not even going to notice those purple flowers. Put the cooler color in front of the warm color, because the warm color, write this down, will help the cool color advance. It will push that purple toward you. The warm color, the yellow in the back, will help push that purple toward you. Thumbs up if you understood that concept. Does that make sense to everyone? The warm color will help the cool color advance and appear closer to you. I see this, and you're going to notice it this coming fall, because you'll see a lot of that color scheme. It's very popular, pansies, the yellow and the purples, and you're going to see a lot of designs where the purple's in the back, and you're going to drive by and you're going to be like, wow, I missed it, because we're not using it correctly. Now, that applies to perennials as well. If you had rudbeckia and you wanted to add in verbena, let's say, if you clearly, because of the plant heights, you're going to have the rudbeckia in the back and the verbena in the front, and it's going to help that verbena advance. So the warm colors can help the cooler colors advance. So if you mix warm and cool colors, you know, it would be a color scheme, but no, it wouldn't be texture. Texture would be different. That's a great question. I'll pause for questions later on as well, but thank you for your comment and your question. So complementary colors. Again, don't think about just the plants themselves. I don't want you to focus on foliage or flowers. Think about the structures as well. If you have a red brick house, green is an easy go-to for your foundation plants. If you have a red brick house, green is an easy go-to. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that if you wanted to do a monochromatic green color scheme for your red brick house, that's going to work very, very well. How many of you have seen a monochromatic green color scheme against a red brick house? Okay, I'm sure you have. You may not have realized it, but I am quite sure that you have. Green stands out against red brick. Now, in your head, I want you to picture loropetalum against a red brick house. Do we know loropetalum, right? We know loropetalum's got that burgundy foliage. Would that stand out necessarily against a red brick house? No. So we need to think about the structures as well. Now, a question that I get asked all the time is, well, what if I don't want a monochromatic green color scheme and I have a red brick house? What flower colors work really, really well? Do you recall analogous colors? You remember colors that are adjacent to each other on the color wheel? What are some colors that are adjacent to red on the color wheel? And I'll let you guys type that into chat. What are some colors that are adjacent to red on a color wheel? So orange, yellow, I'll answer. Oranges and yellows work really, really well with red brick. And I know that we're running short on time. There's just a couple more slides. Complementary colors intensify one another. And this is an example. This is an image from La La Land. Purple is clearly the dominant color. Just because yellow wants to be the dominant color doesn't mean that it has to be. In this example, purple is the dominant color. But look at this purple and look how just adding in a pop of yellow intensifies it. Look at your screen. Purple, that's very pretty. It's purple. And then adding in that pop of yellow. Complementary colors help intensify one another. We're going to pass by this slide. There are other color schemes. These are very uncommon, but they do exist. Triadic color schemes, dyadic color schemes. You can research these on your own. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. They're not as common as the color schemes that I'm going over. We're going to end on this last color scheme, rainbow. Okay, riotous color scheme, a rainbow color scheme. This is the most difficult color scheme to achieve successfully in landscape design, hands down. This is every color on the color wheel. Okay, and so many of you are thinking right now, wow, I have a riotous color scheme in my landscape. And there's nothing wrong with it. They're fantastic. I use riotous color schemes a lot. So don't be overwhelmed by the fact that I said they're difficult. The key with a riotous color scheme, there are two ways to work with a riotous color scheme. Have a dominant color, and I'll just say it, yellow for a riotous color scheme is a good one because yellow advances. So yellow is a great one. Green is part of your color scheme, so that works as well. And it really depends on if we're talking about a perennial bed or if we're talking about an entire landscape, what the dominant color is going to be. But you need a dominant color. Remember with Unity, that dominant feature gives your eye somewhere to rest. Remember that? The same is true with the color scheme. We need a dominant color. So that's one way to make riotous work. Another way, and I want you to look at the two images on the left. The two images on the left, very vibrant hues. Remember, hues, tints, tones, and shades. Hues, tints, tones, shades. Shades is hue plus black. Tone is hue plus gray. Tint is hue plus white and hue. These are pure hues, guys. Look, this is pure hue. Very vibrant, very exciting. These are tones. You see the image on the right? Nothing too vibrant. We're toning it down. We're selecting plants that have very soft color. Nothing that's too vibrant. We've toned everything down. And I'm going to show you an example of that in just a moment. That's a great way to create less chaos, and your design will be less visually overwhelming if you tone your colors down, mix them with grays and neutral colors. And so in this graphic on the right, a lot of neutral colors have been used, and the whole scheme itself is toned down as a result. All right, so we're going to our last two slides, so we wrap up. The wisteria lamp, 1906, sold for $400. Louis Comfort Tiffany was a master of color. This is a wisteria lamp. Think about that for a minute. Wisteria. Wisteria is found in nature. What color scheme is this? And remember, guys, the Art Nouveau period. Everyone pronounces it differently. And then for those of you that know that period, you know what we were trying to emulate. We're trying to emulate nature. This is a complex analogous. Awesome job, Kelly. Thank you very much. Complex analogous color scheme. Do you see how we go from yellow all the way to purple, and so smoothly and so beautifully? Remember, analogous color schemes are found in nature. This is a complex analogous color scheme. And take screenshots, take some pictures with you. There's not a lot about this. It's very unfortunate, and I should make it my life mission to write about some of this. But there's not a lot about this that you'll find online. But this is a complex analogous color scheme. And if you look at it, it's just absolutely master of color. But this very smooth transition from yellow all the way over to its complement of purple. You can see the blues, you can see the different shades of green and all the different purples. Complex analogous. This one's a little tougher. Look at it closely. What color scheme do you think this is? Madonna and Child. Absolutely beautiful work of art here. We've got the 7 angels. We've got Mother Mary, baby Jesus. Look at all the colors. Anybody want to take a guess? What color scheme would you say this is? So it's toned, definitely. This one's not, it's a tonal. You're definitely on the right track. I will say that. Not complex analogous. This is riotous. Study it for just a moment. Every color in the color wheel is in this. Look, you've got yellows, you've got reds, you've got purples, you have blues, you have greens. While I'm going through this, look, you have orange. See the oranges, the reds, the yellows. What is the dominant color in this? What is the dominant color? Robin, you're all over my next point. You're getting the next point, but what is the dominant color? Look at it. What is the color that stands out? Would you say gold? Yellow, orange, gold. Look at all of it down here. Gold, orange. Look at all this. Yellow and orange. Do you see how that's the dominant color? You have yellow as the dominant color. That yellow gold color is the dominant color. Everything else is toned down. Everything else is mixed with gray. It's toned down. And then we have this yellow color. Look at baby Jesus here. This gold color that's been used throughout. So it's a mix between these two colors here, orange and yellow, to create this gold dominant color. Does everyone see that? Thumbs up if you see that now that I've said it. And then everything else is toned down. But look, we've got all of this gold going around here. This is a riotous color scheme. There's a dominant color, check mark, and then everything else has been toned down, check mark. And then we create a successful riotous color scheme. Great designs do not happen by accident. Louis Comfort Tiffany didn't task his artisans with creating that stained glass window. And they came to him and they said, oh, look what we did. That was not by accident. All of those colors were selected intentionally out of 5,000 sheets of glass. And you should be designing with intention as well. You should be giving thought to the purpose of the landscape. You should be giving thought to the color scheme, the type of mood, the type of atmosphere that you're trying to create in your landscape, and design accordingly. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's presentation. I do apologize for going over. I thought I had this down to right at an hour, but I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'm going to pause and take some questions. And if you just raise your hand, and then I'll call you out by name. That way we're not talking over each other. And you all may be muted for all I know. I don't know if you've muted yourselves. You can unmute if you have a question, or you can let me know your question in chat. Tom.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. Going all the way back to your first question, or your first suggestion about getting an aerial picture in just the drawing. How accurate should that kind of an aerial picture be? Is it just conceptual, or do you really need foot by foot?
That's a really great question, and I'm going to answer it in two parts. And it depends greatly on what you're going to be doing within your landscapes. So let's assume for a moment that you are simply wanting to upgrade or enhance your landscape with new plant material, like new foundation plantings, new plant material in the backyard. You could pull an image from Google Earth, an aerial image, and utilize that for a simple planting plan. That would be accurate enough. What I would encourage you to do is to measure and go outside, measure your windowsills, take notes, and utilize that to make sure that when you're planning for that plant material, that it's going to grow together. Remember, mass plantings, let it grow together, and that they're going to be the appropriate size. For a simple planting plan for a client, I will often use Google Earth and some on-site measurements. However, if you are installing privacy trees, if you are installing a patio space, outdoor living spaces, I highly encourage you to get a survey. There are things, and I could spend, Kathleen's already probably about to roll her eyes because of how much time we spent on surveys. There are so many things to consider with your site: easements, right-of-way, building setback lines. All of those things are very important considerations when it comes to outdoor living spaces, privacy trees, etc. You do not want to plant outside of your property. You don't want to plant on an easement for things like that. That's a big no-no. But if it's a simple, hey, I want to upgrade, I have plants here now, and I want to upgrade what those plants are, a Google Earth would suffice. Great question. Any other questions for me? I overwhelmed your minds with a lot of information. I know it's a lot to digest. You'll have questions later on. I do want to share while we're taking questions, let me do a quick share. For those of you, you can jot down my email address. I'm on Instagram. This is my Instagram handle here, Williams_design_artistry, my website, and my email address. So feel free to jot that down. You can email me any questions that you have. I do consultations. I will be offering additional classes. Again, I taught at Emory for 5 years. I will be doing some standalone classes on my own, and that information will be released soon. I'm planning on rolling those out this fall on my Instagram account. So please follow me on Instagram. I actually just started on Instagram last week. So would love to get some followers and would love to share information with you. So feel free to jot this down. And then I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna give just one more moment of the screen for everybody to take a picture of it or scribble down. And then I'm gonna stop the share so that I can go back and take a few more questions. Yeah, and that might be the easiest way. Just snap that picture. All right, I think I give everybody enough time there. If you missed it, I'm sure that Jennifer, feel free to share that information if you'd like with the group.
I will, Jonathan, and I just wanted to take a moment now to tell you on.
Oh, I lost Jennifer.
Yeah, I lost Jennifer.
For analogous color schemes, and we'll let Jennifer, maybe she'll have to log back in, so we'll give her just a second. I did have a question come through from Kathleen. For analogous color schemes, does it matter where on the color wheel you start? No, it does not matter. So for example, with the red brick, we chose red, and then we could jump on either side of red for that color scheme. But that's a question that comes up a lot with red brick. I think the average homeowner struggles with what colors to use with red brick. You know, a complementary color scheme, like a monochromatic green color scheme, works really well, especially if you're wanting a formal style or aesthetic to your home. So monochromatic green is a great way to go. But having an analogous warm color scheme of, you know, red, orange, and yellow works very, very well with a red brick home as well. Great question, Kathleen.
Yeah. All right. So Jennifer just said her battery died.
Oh no, that's the worst. You know, I actually had that happen at the very tail end of a class that I was teaching for Emory. So I've been teaching for a year and a half via Zoom, and my cord was plugged in to my laptop, but it wasn't plugged in completely to the wall. So at the last minute, it died. So at least it didn't die 20 minutes ago would be what I would say to that. She made it through. So I'm thinking about how to add these principles to an existing landscape, different process than designing a new plan, best way to fix. So the first thing that I would say, Kelly, is to identify what you have. Maybe you have a riotous color scheme, which could likely be the case if you haven't given a lot of thought to color theory in your landscape. And again, a riotous color scheme, there's nothing wrong with that. What you may find is that you just need to add in more of an already existing dominant color. So let's say that you go out and you inventory your landscape and you determine, hey, in fact, I do have some yellow. Maybe just adding yellow would create that dominant color. Maybe that color's red. Maybe you already have a lot of red and you could add more red or more green. That's one way to think about it. The other principle that I would remind you of is unity. A lot of times I approach landscapes where I have a frustrated homeowner that's just like, it just feels messy. It feels overwhelming to me. My landscape makes me anxious. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I think if we're honest with each other, all of us have probably felt that way at one time or another about our landscape. It makes us anxious. So by adding in a dominant feature, like a water feature, like a ornamental tree, a statue, you know, it could be a bird bath. It could be something as simple as a teak bench. That gives the eye somewhere to rest and immediately creates unity within your landscape. That's a great consideration. Just adding in that dominant feature. Maybe you decide, you know what, if I just put in a bench, that would do it. That's all I need. One quick comment I want to make on that. How many of you are familiar? Picture an English cottage garden in your mind, full of perennials, different colors. You can picture that. Now, when I say white arbor, that seems to fit. That's a dominant feature. You've got all these perennials, and then you have that white arbor. And there you go. There's your dominant feature. And the fact that you have dozens and dozens of different types of perennials no longer matters, because that white arbor is what we see. And we think English cottage garden. And I saw a lot of aha moments when I said that. That's as simple as it is. Take out the white arbor and it's just an overwhelming sea of perennials.
Jonathan, I think we could all listen to you for like the next 3 hours. It was absolutely fantastic. Just great. As you can see, the comments from everyone, and we have learned so much. And I know that the rest of the Master Gardeners, including myself, are really looking forward to seeing when your classes are going to be and following you so that we can continue to learn from you in such an exciting and easy to understand manner. So please, on behalf of all the Master Gardeners, accept my very warmest thank you. It was just fantastic and truly fabulous. And I'm sorry that we're out of time here, but we're going to have to wrap this up. And I will be following up with you afterwards, and want to once again thank you for the time, the information, and just the wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it, everyone. Look forward to speaking with you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, John.